There's a narrative building up in certain quarters about this version of the Taliban, Taliban 2, as some people call it, being different from the earlier version of Taliban. And this is a narrative that's actually been built over the last few years. That there is a good Taliban and a bad Taliban. How do you really assess this? You can assess it in two ways. You can assess it by looking at the past, right? And you look at the track record of the Taliban when they governed Afghanistan. There's no other way to put it. They took the country back to the dark ages. That doesn't inspire any confidence. And if you look at their behavior since, I don't think it's particularly changed. I still think that it is a deeply sectarian and religious kind of governance model that they will follow, if at all there is going to be a governance model, because we really don't know whether they will be able to run the country, because the last time they were in control, but I don't think they governed Afghanistan. Most social and economic indicators during the first phase of their rule really plummeted in Afghanistan. The other way of measuring or assessing whether they are indeed different is by looking at how they behave now, is by looking at how they treat minorities, is by looking at how they treat women, especially is looking at how they treat children, girl children, is looking at their response to whether women can work, whether girls can go to schools. We don't know, right? I mean, it's far too early to say. They've been in power for less than a week. And we sometimes tend to forget that these things play out over time. I definitely would not go as far enough as some people, the English general who said that they're country boys with a code of honor, which is probably the most charitable way that they've ever been described. And I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those sentences that comes back to haunt people, right? I think he's never going to live this down. But I think all of us should wait and watch, but we shouldn't expect too much. I think the big question now facing not just India but a lot of other countries is, do you recognize this government? Right? And we don't know. We still do not know whether India will ever recognize this government. We do not know whether many Western nations will recognize this government. Some may eventually, and then eventually India may, but at this point in time, we do not know. The only thing that India can do at this point in time is to keep its options open, which means, sure, engage in back channel talks with the Taliban, but at the same time be very, very wary of the fact that the last time the Taliban was in power in Afghanistan, it didn't do us any good. It didn't do us any good in terms of our regional interests. It did not do us any good in terms of jihadis from Afghanistan traveling to Kashmir and fighting what they see as a religious war there. The number of foreign fighters in Kashmir has actually gone down, and will that see an increase now? These are things that India has to worry about. Sure, there are Indian economic interests in Afghanistan, but they are not huge economic interests. We've helped in the country's rebuilding, but we do not have deep or large economic interests there. So I think the best thing for India to do at this point in time would be to talk to the Taliban, but on our terms, not on the Taliban's terms, and be very, very wary, which I'm sure they are. I know that the Indian government has come in for a lot of criticism for not being proactive enough in talking to the Taliban, but I think you have to look at the history of this group. You have to look at the fact that when the US launched the war on terror, most senior members of the Taliban quietly relocated to Quetta, in Pakistan, from where they ran it. You will have to look at the fact that the inter-services intelligence does have a lot of influence, not complete influence, but does have a lot of influence over the Taliban. So I think you can look at it either ways. There are three ways in which the whole Pakistan-Afghanistan dynamic can play out. The first one, of course, is what a few commentators have already said, which is that the US finally sees through Pakistan's perfidy, right, and realizes the game that it's been playing. I'm not sure that will happen, but the truth is, it is pretty close to that, because for so many years Pakistan has portrayed itself as the US's faithful partner in the war against terror, and you look at what has happened right now, and you look at Pakistan's reaction to this, it's pretty clear who did what. The second is that Pakistan will exert significant influence over the Taliban, pretty much calling the shots, that the ISI will tell them what to do, what not to do. I'm not sure that is going to happen, which brings us to the third one, for which we have a track record. We pretty much know that during the previous rule of the Taliban in Afghanistan, the relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan existed, but they existed on the Taliban's terms. So it wasn't as if Pakistan was even able to resolve outstanding issues. In fact, they were not even able to resolve the outstanding issue of their non-existent border with Pakistan, because I think back then the Taliban leadership said, what is a mere border between brothers, or some such, right? And so I think it is going to be a lot of the third. I don't think it's going to be anything else. So sure, he's going to cop a lot of criticism for this. There are people who are going to say he should not have done this, or he should have done this in a different way. But at the end of the day, I think his domestic constituency doesn't really care. They may care right now, but I don't think 6 months from now, the domestic constituency in the US is going to be particularly bothered that he withdrew from Afghanistan. There is definitely going to be a wave of reprisals against anyone who was part of the Afghan army or armed forces, or the police, or anyone who collaborated with the US, irrespective of what the Taliban said. As said, what is also likely to happen over the next few years is you're likely to see the same kind of build-up of terrorism and terrorist entities and terrorist organizations centered around Afghanistan, pretty much like what happened during the first phase of the Taliban's rule. Even today, there are already reports that some of the Pakistani terror groups which are active in Kashmir actually having moved some of their cadres to Afghanistan, and I think you're going to see more of it in coming days. The last time around, there were training camps that were set up there. There was active support that was given to them. And if that happens, then if Afghanistan becomes, and it seems likely, if Afghanistan becomes a hub of terrorism and terrorist organizations like it did the last time around, it could come back to bite the US, because not only will they target US installations, they're likely to target the installations of US allies in Europe, which is a lot closer. So from that perspective, it could hurt the US presidency. But again, it's a week. We'll have to watch. We'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see how the world reacts, because I don't think the world has reacted yet. Everyone is just making sure that their people are safe at this point in time. Everyone's first priority has been to evacuate their people, to ensure the safety of the people working in their missions. Now I think they will start thinking about other issues. Afghanistan's overseas assets have already been blocked at the request of the US, according to a Reuters report. You will probably see more such. Even Russia, as not, I mean, again, which is why I keep saying it's a weak. Even Russia, according to um, Russia, still recognizes Taliban as a terrorist organization, right? They've not changed that, although they've started ruling Afghanistan. So you will see how things develop or evolve over the next couple of weeks. But I don't think it bodes well for the region. I don't think it bodes well for peace. I think terrorist organizations in the region have received a fillip, and I would dearly love to be proved wrong about all of this.